Something doesn't feel right, and when a legend like Boris Becker speaks up, the entire tennis world stops and listens. Because this time, it's not just praise, not just analysis, it's a warning. And it's aimed directly at one of the brightest stars in the game right now, Carlos Alcaraz. Just days before the Madrid Open, fans were expecting fireworks. The home crowd, the energy, the anticipation of seeing Alcaraz dominate on clay again, it all felt perfectly lined up. But then, suddenly, everything changed. A withdrawal. Quiet, unexpected, and honestly, a little unsettling. And that's where the story really begins. Because this wasn't just about missing one tournament. This was about a pattern. A feeling that something deeper might be going on beneath the surface. Let's rewind for a moment. After an intense run at Monte Carlo, where Alcaraz pushed himself all the way to the final, there were already signs of fatigue. You could see it, not just physically, but mentally too. He fought hard, but in the end, Jannik Sinner proved just a bit stronger on that day. Now losing a final is never easy. But what came after raised even more eyebrows. Alcaraz moved on to Barcelona, a tournament where expectations were sky high. Fans believed this would be his bounce-back moment. And at first, it looked like everything was under control. He stepped onto the court, played his opening match, and secured a win. But if you were watching closely, something felt off. There were moments during that match where his movement didn't look as fluid. His shots lacked that explosive sharpness we've come to expect. And then, the wrist. That subtle discomfort turned into a major concern almost overnight. And before anyone could fully process it, Alcaraz withdrew. Just like that. No long run. No comeback story. Just silence. And this is exactly what caught Boris Becker's attention. Because Becker isn't the type to overreact. He's seen it all, dominance, injuries, comebacks, collapses. So when he speaks, it usually comes from a place of deep understanding. And this time, his message carried a different tone. It wasn't panic. It wasn't criticism. It was concern. He pointed out something that many fans didn't want to admit: the warning signs were already there. The withdrawal from Barcelona wasn't just bad luck. It was part of a bigger picture. Timing, as Becker emphasized, is everything in tennis. And right now, the timing couldn't be worse. The clay season is not just another stretch of tournaments. It's a defining period. It's where legacies are shaped, where confidence is built, and where the best players separate themselves from the rest. For Alcaraz, clay is supposed to be his territory. But instead of building momentum, he's now dealing with uncertainty. And that uncertainty doesn't just affect his body, it affects his mindset. Because here's the thing people often overlook: injuries don't just slow you down physically. They creep into your thoughts. They make you hesitate. They force you to question movements that once felt natural. And for a player like Alcaraz, whose game is built on fearless aggression and creativity, even a small doubt can make a huge difference. That's what makes Becker's warning so powerful. He's not just talking about one injury. He's talking about the ripple effect. Miss a tournament, lose rhythm. Lose rhythm, lose confidence. Lose confidence, and suddenly, the gap between you and your rivals starts to feel a little bigger. And speaking of rivals, there's one name that keeps coming up in this conversation: Jannik Sinner. Because while Alcaraz is dealing with setbacks, Sinner is doing the exact opposite. He's building. He's improving. He's winning. And perhaps most importantly, he's staying consistent. Becker highlighted this dynamic perfectly. He talked about how great rivalries aren't just about talent, they're about contrast. Different styles, different strengths, pushing each other to evolve. And right now, Sinner is playing that role to perfection. His calm, calculated approach is becoming the perfect counterbalance to Alcaraz's explosive energy. It's like watching two completely different philosophies collide on the same court. And that's what makes this rivalry so exciting. But it also raises an important question. What happens if one side starts to slow down? Because dominance in tennis is fragile. It doesn't take much for the balance to shift. One injury. One missed tournament. One loss of confidence. And suddenly, the player who looked unstoppable starts chasing instead of leading. That's the scenario Becker seems to be hinting at. Not as a prediction, but as a possibility. And when you look at the bigger picture, it starts to make sense. Because the tour isn't just about two players. There are others watching closely, waiting for opportunities. Players like Alexander Zverev, who Becker specifically mentioned, are not far behind. They're experienced, hungry, and more than capable of stepping in when the door opens. And right now, that door might be opening just a little. But here's where things get really interesting. Because if there's one thing we know about Alcaraz, it's this: he doesn't stay down for long. This is a player who thrives under pressure. A player who turns setbacks into motivation. A player who has already shown, at such a young age, that he can adapt, evolve, and come back stronger. So while the concerns are real, so is the potential for a powerful response. In fact, this could be the moment that defines his season. Not the wins. Not the titles. But how he handles this challenge. Does he rush back and risk making things worse? Or does he take the time to recover fully, reset mentally, and return with purpose? That decision could shape everything that comes next. Because the clay season doesn't wait. The competition doesn't slow down. And the spotlight never fades. Every move, every match, every comeback attempt, it's all under scrutiny. And somewhere in the middle of all this, there's a young player trying to balance expectation with reality. Trying to protect his body while chasing greatness. Trying to prove that this is just a temporary setback, not the start of something bigger. And that's why Becker's words matter so much. They're not meant to bring doubt. They're meant to bring awareness. Because sometimes, the biggest challenges aren't the ones you see on the scoreboard. They're the ones you feel behind the scenes. The fatigue. The pressure. The constant demand to perform at the highest level. And for Alcaraz, all of that is happening right now. So as fans, we're left with a mix of emotions. Concern, because we want to see him healthy. Curiosity, because we don't know what comes next. And excitement, because if there's one thing tennis has taught us, it's that comebacks often create the most unforgettable moments. So maybe this isn't the beginning of a decline. Maybe it's the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where Alcaraz learns, adjusts, and comes back even stronger. But for that to happen, the next steps have to be smart. Calculated. Patient. Because talent alone isn't enough at this level. Longevity matters. Timing matters. And right now, those are the exact things being tested. So the question is simple. Will this setback slow him down, or set him up for something even bigger? Let me know what you think. Is this just a small bump in the road for Alcaraz, or are Becker's concerns a real warning sign for the rest of the season? Because one thing is certain, the tennis world will be watching very closely. And the next move could change everything.